Hello and welcome to our college planning workshop. We're super excited that you could join us. We're going to cover a lot of information in a short amount of time. So hope you get to learn as much as you possibly can here. But we also understand everybody's situation is different, right? So we also offer, if you'd like, after this workshop, you can sign up for a one-on-one time to speak with us about your situation specifically. Feel free to reach out. I'll put the information on the screen at the end. But since we do have a lot of information, let's go ahead and get started here. First, we like to put up on the screen some concerns. One of the major concerns that we hear from a lot of parents, and I like to do this because if you see one or many of your concerns on this list, just know that you're not alone. There's also a number of concerns out there that aren't listed here that hopefully we can help. But essentially, when we talk to a family or work with a family, we feel like we can help just about 90% of anybody that's out there, depending on their situation. So if your concern's not listed here, don't worry, we'll still be able to help you as well. Now, one of the questions we get is, what is the number one thing that you would recommend going through this process? And really what we say is don't limit yourself. Keep your options open. Keep your thoughts broad. There are many different ways to go about this, and we'll talk a lot about that today. So, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to cover today's college costs. We're going to look at SATs and ACTs, how the schools look at them and how you should treat them. We're also going to talk about how do colleges select students, and how are we going to pay for this education. We'll also show you the timeline for success in this process. And then we'll go through a few case studies of some families that have gone through our program and show you how it works in real time. But first, let's talk about those costs. So I think we all know this. College is expensive, right? Now, these numbers are numbers that are reported from the school to the federal government every year. They have to let the government know how much it costs to go to their school. And these are the averages across the country for each specific group. So public universities, just under 30,000 a year. Private universities, just under 57,000 a year, and then elite schools, 78 and up. You can even look at your USCs out in California. They're over $90,000 a year to go to. Now, what's important about these numbers is you understand this is what is called cost of attendance. So that's not just tuition, that's what it costs to go to the university, including fees, room and board, meals, all sorts of things. So this is the average for cost of attendance. Now, how that looks today versus how that looked even 30, 40 years ago is remarkable, right? And we like to show this chart because it just kind of shows how college costs are really outpacing just about every other aspect of our life. And you can see where it really started to take a turn north is early 2000s. There's kind of that sharp spike there. And I know super popular these days to talk about AI. And it's a hot button topic. And, people are kind of perfecting it and working on it now. But really what you see is colleges were using predictive analytics before really anybody else. And they got super efficient with how they do their business. And that's really when you started to see the spike in cost. And they are not getting worse at it, they're getting better at it. Now, a couple of local schools, as you guys can see on the screen, in the state of Georgia here, we're pretty much on target with the national average, right? So just under $30,000 a year to go to our local state schools. And our private schools actually kind of run the whole gambit. So we've got Emory that's up there with the elites at over $80,000 a year. And then your Mercer's, Berry's right around 60,000 a year too. Couple of popular out-of-state schools that we see right around the Atlanta area, with Auburn and Tennessee right around 60,000. That's going to be pretty standard for your out-of-state schools. And then, of course, your elites with your Harvards and your Princetons, right around 90,000. Now, what most people don't know is that these days, only 19% of graduates, sorry, 19% of students are graduating in 4 years. where it used to be, hey, we've got a 4-year education, you're going to college for 4 years. Less than 20% of students are doing that. And in fact, the actual average for obtaining a bachelor's degree right now is 6.2 years. So, number of factors that go into that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But really, when you're planning for school now, you got to plan for more than 4 years because the average is so high. And if you take a look at that over, just cost combined, if you're looking at a regular state public school, 6 years, I mean, that's over $160,000 to go. And then if you got 2 kids or 3 kids, you can just multiply that and you can see that these numbers get very big really fast. So it's important to plan for that. Okay, let's move along and let's talk about standardized tests. So we're going to talk about SAT and ACT and a couple of important things that have come up recently. Number one, test optional. This became really popular 2020 with COVID. A lot of schools started saying, hey, you don't have to submit scores to apply to our school. Now, for a number of schools, that's still true. You do not have to do that. However, we in our program, we say that this is just not the case. Test optional is not a thing. You have to take your test. There are over 30,000 high schools in this country. It is very hard to stand out GPA alone. Also, if you're looking for aid, looking to drive the cost down on college, you're going to have to take those tests. Now, how many times should my student take these tests? As many as possible to get the score that they want. It's never a bad thing to continue to take these tests and to improve on your scores. Schools are going to look at that favorably. Should my student focus on the SAT or the ACT? This does not matter to schools, which is great. Whichever one your student excels, that's the one you go with. So, hey, SAT is a little bit more of a reasoning-based test. ACT is a little bit more curriculum. Whichever one they're better at, focus on that and send in those scores. When should my student take the tests? As early as possible. Start taking those PSATs sophomore year. Get early junior year, get into taking these tests so you can take it as many times as you need to get the score that you want. Now, how will the university treat these tests? Now, universities don't necessarily treat standardized tests as an IQ test. Obviously, if you get a high score, they're going to know you're smart. However, they really treat it as a speed test. And what that means is they take a look at your score and they say, okay, this is how quickly this student can retain our information and get through our curriculum. In a quick, for instance, I'm going to take you through a couple schools in this state, but let's talk about number one up top, the University of Georgia. Let's say the average get-in range at UGA is 1270 to 1470. Now, what this means is if you're on the bottom tier of that range, let's say you're a 1270 student, they're going to think it's probably going to take you a little bit longer to get through their curriculum than a student in the 1470 range, meaning you're probably going to be one of those students to them that's going to be there for 6 years. You're probably going to be at that average or even longer. So that's how they treat these tests. They have an SAT range and it's a speed test for them. Okay, next, let's talk about what the universities want when you're applying. Number one, they want your money. I know it sounds silly, but schools are a business and education is their product, right? So what they're looking for is obviously your money. Now, when you're applying, there's a couple of different factors that are going to go into this, and all of these are part of what's called enrollment management. I think we've all heard of admissions before. Admissions is now part of a bigger group that's called enrollment management. And basically, all of these things are ringing bells. And what we want to do is we want to ring as many bells as possible to try to get into this school and get aid. So, GPA, class rank, SAT scores, these all kind of go hand in hand and they're all very important. Again, SAT, ACT, not optional. Now, I know some schools don't publish class rank. That's a situation where schools understand this and they will look at your other factors. So your GPA, SAT, again, important. Co-curricular activities, very important. They want well-rounded students. They don't just want students with their nose in the books. They want to know that you're involved elsewhere. This doesn't have to be school clubs, even though school clubs are great. But let's say you have a job outside of school. Let's say you play club sports. Let's say you are involved in volunteering. All of this stuff is very important to showcase the student as a well-rounded student. Essays. Essays are super important. Cold hard truth, not every school is going to read every essay. It's just not going to be the case. However, if it's your student versus another student in what I like to call an admissions battle, if their essay is better, they're going to get in. So again, very important. Now, you want to make sure that you are proofreading the essays for your student, either that or have a teacher or counselor do that if they're willing. You also do not want your student to write their essay on ChatGPT. The schools can sniff this out by a mile. Next, fit. And fit is really all of these factors that we're talking about here. But schools want a good fit. They want to know you're going to stay on campus. If you don't fit there, you're a risk to them of transferring or failing out. And that's not good for their business, right? They want students who are going to stay there and graduate. So they want to make sure you're a good fit. The next one, a display of student interest. Now, this is very important when it comes to schools providing acceptance. And what this means is if your student has a school on their list that they are looking to go to or they want to go to, they need to engage with that school. That can be anything from likes on social media posts. They can join an email list for the school. In fact, every time they join an email list for a school, when they go on their website, they will know that they're on their website. Also, school visits. It's great to get on campus if you're interested in a school. It's important because they want to know that you might want to go there. If you send in an application without having engaged with that school, they consider that a ghost application. And to them, that's a risk that they might provide acceptance to you and you turn them down. Next, special skills and abilities. Are we on a club soccer team? Do we play in the band? Did we build a nuclear reactor in our backyard? Any of these things are great. Now, you might not have intentions on doing them in college, but it's very important to highlight them on your applications. Next, strength of recommendations. Again, kind of similar, excuse me, again, kind of similar to essays. They're not going to look at all of them. However, it could be the difference between you getting in over another student. So make sure your recommendations are good and strong. Diversity. If you have any ethnicity in your background, now is not the time to be shy about it. Every school has to hit some sort of demographic that they want, and you never know when that could help get you in. And next, full pay candidates. They want students who are going to write checks for the total cost every semester. And we always say those full pay candidates pay for the kids who get financial aid. So kind of got to decide which ones you want. Now, of course, why the universities want this? First of all, if they get the right fit and they get students that are on campus and they're thriving, they're improving their graduation rates and student persistence. They also might have some sort of mission statement that they're trying to achieve. So a student could fit one of those categories and slide right into their mission. Now, what this does is it increases their perceived prestige, right? Or their perceived value. I mean, how many colleges do you look at and you say, oh, that's a lower tier school, only because you don't understand or you don't know them as much as a school that markets better or is playing on every Saturday on in the SEC, right? It increases their perceived value. And all of this stuff, growing up the rankings, all of that can lead to them charging more for tuition. That's everyone's goal. We want to make as much money as possible. Again, remember, every school is a business. Okay, so a couple of rules of thumb that we like to use as we go through this process. One, be an educated consumer. You guys are here, you're watching this. That is great. That means you want as much information as possible when you go into this process. Keep that thought process going. We also want to caution too, when you receive materials from schools, make sure you're double checking the information. If you get something like a mailer from a school that information is marketing material and it's going to be biased. One of the big things that we see that's typically off a little bit is usually graduation rates. They can kind of flub those a little bit. So make sure that you are, double checking everything that you see when it comes from a school. Be educated. Now, the top-down approach. This is a little bit different than what most students are thinking these days and how they go about it. And really, what we see mostly is students say, hey, I'm going to pick 4 or 5 schools and apply to them. If I don't get into A, I'll go to B. If I don't get into B, I'll go to C. And our thought is there are 2,600 four-year schools in this country. Why are we only picking 4 or 5? We can use them all. So instead of just this little number, what we can do is use them all and eliminate and go down from there. You want to create leverage for yourself. You want to build possibility. And you can't do that if you're just picking schools because mom or dad went there, or boyfriend or girlfriend are going there, or you heard they have a good program and something you're interested in. It's not the way to go about it. You want all of your options available. Next, what you're going to try to do is you're going to try to get that list down to about 6 to 10 schools that you want to apply to. We found that that's really the sweet spot. Now, there's no substitute for a visit. Get on campus. And it doesn't even have to be schools that you particularly want to go to. We find it advantageous to visit schools of different size. Go to a small school, go to a medium school, go to a big school. Especially in this area, in the Atlanta area, we've got an hour drive and you can hit a number of all of these and just take a look at campuses. I think a lot of times students think, oh, I really want to go to a big school, but you could step on campus at a smaller school and say, you know what, this is actually more my speed. This is a better fit for me. So go check them all out. We also caution to parents, if your student has a school number 1 on their list, do not go visit there first because if they fall in love with it, your search is effectively over at that point. Now, ensure the colleges will want your student before applications are started. This is virtually in the scheme of things, what we call, nowadays can be impossible with the way that students go through the process. However, I don't know if any of you guys have done a college search online where essentially what you do is you fill out a bunch of information and you say, you know what, I'm good at this. I kind of want to study that, and I want to stay in this region of the country. When you fill that out, typically what they do is they give you a list of about 100 schools where you might fit. So what we do is we start with that list. We say, okay, where are we going to fit in, right? And let's say that's 100 different schools. Now, what they'll do is they'll give you a little 5-page report on each school, and you go through that. Now, how many of you are actually going to go through 500 pages to see what's going to be the best school for you? Probably not that many people. So if we kind of break that down and we say, okay, we know we're going to fit into these schools, let's take our academics into play and say, hey, where are we going to get in? We can maybe eliminate half of those schools where we think we fit. So instead of, 500 pages, maybe we're down to 250 now. That's still a lot. Is anybody really going to read through all that? Probably not, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to take those fit in schools, break them down to the get in schools, and then we're going to take the academics and the financials of the family and talk about, hey, what if these schools are actually going to pay us to come there? Where are we going to get a scholarship? Where are we going to get a discount? So that way we're kind of breaking down our list from 2,600 schools all the way down to the 6 to 10 that we're going to apply to, that we know we're going to get in and we know we're going to get aid. And that's kind of how we run our program. Now, let's talk about aid a little bit. So financial aid, typically based on 2 aspects. One is need and one is merit. And now need is your stuff, right? Your income, your assets, that kind of thing. We'll go through that in the next slide. Merit is just that. Merit, SAT, SATs, grades, GPAs, all of our extracurriculars, how we are well-rounded as a student. Schools give scholarships for that. Now, however, there is also another factor that goes into merit, and unfortunately, that is also your money, right? When you apply for merit aid, they are going to dig a little bit deeper into your finances than FAFSA will, and they will take that into account when they're offering you merit scholarships. Let's just do a quick for instance. Let's say we've got two students, basically the same academically, same extracurriculars, all of that. Let's say family A has saved up $200,000. Let's say family B doesn't have any savings. Which one do you think is going to get more merit aid? It's going to be the family that doesn't have any savings because they know the family with $200,000 has that $200,000 and they're going to want it. They know that they have it. So unfortunately, yes, money is a part of merit aid as well. You've got to know how you're positioned before you're applying for these things. Okay, so let's talk about how need aid works. So we always kind of say SAT, ACT, GPA. These are the important numbers for the student to understand. For the family, for the parents, that green box right there, SAI, Student Aid Index, that's your most important number. So, Student Aid Index is when you fill out the FAFSA form, that's a federal government form, the government is going to then give you a number, your student aid index, that they think you can pay each year for college. So you fill out all that information and they say, you know what, we think you can pay this much for college. So that is your student aid index. And every school that you apply to, again, will receive that number. And they'll say, okay, we know they can pay this much. Now, how need aid works. We talked about cost of attendance earlier. Remember, not just tuition, room and board, meals, all of that good stuff. Let's say we're applying to a school that cost of attendance is $38,000. If our student aid index, the number the government gave us that they think we can pay each year is 24,000, that means at that school we have a $14,000 worth of need. Now, that doesn't mean the school is going to give you $14,000. Not all schools provide that. However, that is the gap that you have between what you can pay and what the school costs. So that is how need is figured out. Now, you'll see these two other numbers at the bottom. We call it modified need. Let's say you go out and get a Rotary scholarship for $2,000. Now, you get that senior year going into your freshman year of college, and that's awesome. You got extra money, all good things, right? However, when you filled out your FAFSA form and included that information, that scholarship is going to go against you. That is not going to go towards the school. So they are going to think you can pay $2,000 more than you typically can. So the problem with that is if you have that one-time scholarship, you could be missing out on aid for years 2, 3, 4, and maybe 5 and 6. So again, free money or scholarship money isn't something that's a bad thing, but you need to know how you're positioned. Do I qualify for need aid? Do I not? Before you apply for these scholarships. You don't want to miss out on extra money going throughout college. Okay, so where is all of this aid, right? There's over $130 billion worth of aid out there. And you guys will notice if you look at the screen here, that big gray chunk, 45% of this aid is through federal loans. Well, who wants a loan, right? Nobody wants a loan. We don't want to be in debt. What we want to do is we want to attack this 25% in grants. So our employer and institutional grants. This is the money that comes from the schools. We call this green money. It's the money you don't have to pay back. This is the stuff we want to attack. So we hear this all the time. I fill out FAFSA. I make too much. I'm never going to get any money from the government. That may be the case. However, the money that's coming from the schools, the money you want anyways, you don't want those federal loans. And you can get that regardless of what you're bringing in. Okay, we're going to go through Hope Scholarship real quick. Now, what I want to do is point your attention to that number at the bottom, about 29.5% average. This is the amount of students that are essentially keeping hope. So statistically, most students do not keep hope throughout their 4 years. Okay. 70% of all Hope applicants are applying to UGA and Georgia Tech. The majority don't get in, so they apply to other state schools. So it's very important to have a backup plan. Look at all the schools, better fit, better price, better education, graduate in 4 years. That's what we're looking to do. Okay. So with Hope, again, Hope NZL are great programs. You just have to be cautious if you're utilizing these as your financial strategy. Hope covers about 80 to 85% of tuition. Remember, we talked about that's not necessarily cost of attendance, that's tuition. So it's covering a percentage of a percentage, essentially. You have to keep that 3.0 throughout college, and you must keep that going throughout 4 years. You've got 4 years to do that. Zell Miller does cover 100% of tuition. Again, not cost of attendance. However, it's a little bit more stringent to get this, as you need a 3.7 GPA in high school, and you need to have a 1200 on your SAT or a 26 on your ACT. You do have to maintain a 3.3 while you are going through college to keep this program as well. Okay, let's talk about some aid myths or reality. We hear this all the time. My income's too high to receive financial aid. This is a myth. We've had families make over $500,000 that get aid. We've also seen families that make $30,000 get no aid. It's all about how you position yourself. Next, no aid for middle class families. Of course, that's a myth. We've just talked about how you can get aid basically in any income class. My grades are too low for aid. That's also a myth. There is nowhere on the FAFSA form that asks for your academics. Okay. If you get into a school and you qualify and they provide it, you get that aid. Now, I own a home. This might hinder me from getting aid. That's a myth when it comes to FAFSA. However, it can be a reality. If you are applying for merit aid, they may look into things like home equity, business income, things like that. If you own any business assets, that stuff will be taken into consideration. So it's important to know how to position yourself if that's part of your plan. It's an easy process. I don't think we ever really hear this, but obviously it's not. Merit scholarships are only for exceptionally gifted students. This is also a myth. We've seen students with an 850 SAT get a merit scholarship. So again, just depends on where you're looking and how you're positioned. And then I must complete FAFSA to get financial aid. This is a reality. You absolutely have to fill out FAFSA if you're looking for any type of financial aid. Now, the FAFSA form, super important. Now, this slide has a bunch of numbers, bunch of words. I'm going to make it easy for you. Family A and Family B have the same financials, same income, same savings, all of that. Now, when Family A filled out their FAFSA form, their SAI, the number the government thinks they can pay each year for school, was about $27,000. Family B knew how to position their assets, knew how to fill out FAFSA correctly, and ended up, the government thought they only had to pay $11,444 per year. Now, this comes up quite often. FAFSA seems like it's easy to fill out. We have found studies show about 80% of families actually fill out FAFSA incorrectly in some form. So before you go into doing that and going through the FAFSA information, once you do that, you have your number. Wouldn't it be good to know what your SAI is before you go into that? And that's what we like to try to help you figure out. Now, our next slide, let's talk about aid. Again, another slide with a bunch of numbers and a bunch of words. We're not going to confuse you here. The main point is the top. Not all colleges are created equal. How many of you guys looked at that first slide where we showed the costs of all the colleges in the state and said, yeah, we got to stay in state? The point of this slide is to tell you, you don't necessarily have to, okay? Just because a school, and I call it sticker price or cost of attendance, just because their cost of attendance looks lower, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be cheaper. For instance, College A, let's say that's a $50,000 cost of attendance, so private school. Let's say College B is $28,000, that's our state school. Now, College A is going to provide 100% of that need met. So let's say your SAI was only 10,000. That means you have 40,000 in aid. College A is going to meet that, right? College B is only going to meet 50% of your need at that school. So if you go all the way down to the bottom and see, hey, actually our total bottom line cost to go to this $50,000 school, it's only going to cost us 18 because of the need they're providing for us, because of the aid that they're giving us. Now, College B, your state school, doesn't provide as much aid and ends up costing more than that $50,000 school. So again, the main point here is don't take a school off your list just because you think it looks expensive. They could provide more aid for you than even your local state school. And just a quick look at a couple of schools around the country and how they provide aid, we'll look at the University of Michigan. They provide a lot more need-based aid than they do merit-based aid. So if you're in a situation where you qualify for need, a school like a Michigan would provide a lot of that. Now, Alabama, on the other side, they provide a bunch of merit aid. Actually, over 30% of their applicants receive, on average, about $16,000, $17,000 worth of merit aid. A lot of merit aid at a school like Alabama. So if you don't qualify for need aid, that's a school that you might want to look towards. Tulane, they do both very evenly. They provide a lot of need and merit-based aid, some really good opportunities at a school like Tulane. And then Stanford, they don't provide merit aid. They think if you get in, that's your merit, right? And if you don't qualify for need aid, you're going to spend $95,000 a year to go to that school. So the important piece here is to know how you're positioned. Again, what kind of aid do I qualify for? And then what schools provide that? If I don't qualify for need-based aid and I'm applying to a school like Stanford, I'm not going to get aid. Okay, some of the biggest mistakes that we see. Now, not knowing your net cost for all 4 years before you start applying. And this just means, hey, we're just going to apply. We're going to go willy-nilly and say, hey, apply wherever you want to go. And if you get in, we'll figure that out. You got to know how much it's going to cost if you're going to go to this school for all 4 years. Not having a family merit and financial aid strategy. This is a big mistake because it's, hey, I don't know what kind of aid we're going to get, and I don't know how we're going to pay if we don't get aid. So understanding that before you start applying. Not knowing the best strategy to pay for all 4 years. We see a lot of families come to us and say, hey, I've got this 529. It's going to cover the first year and a half. We'll just figure it out after that gets done. No, like we should figure out how we're going to attack all 4, 5, 6 years before we get into this situation. Now, number four, I find to be one of the most important, not having this college cost conversation with all the decision makers and the students. Now, a lot of families aren't comfortable talking about finances with their students, and that's totally fine. However, students need to know how much college costs. They need to understand the amount of money that goes into this process. And number five, not having a college admissions game plan that works with your college financial plan. So, hey, our college financial plan can cover X amount. Don't apply to schools that cost X times two. Have your financial plan line up with your admissions plan, schools that you can afford. Okay, I mentioned this earlier. We talked about enrollment management and how admissions has become this big game. But what I want to do is I want to show you, and this is we'll make this as simple as possible. We'll consider this screen right here an incoming freshman class at any given university. Each dot on this board is going to represent a student. Okay, so if we look towards the far right, we're going to see, hey, these are our 6-year students, and we're going to look up top and we're going to say these are our full pay students. So we've got, let's use the University of Georgia as an example. We talked about their SAT range earlier. So let's say we've got some 1270 kids that we think are going to be 6-year kids. We've got 1270 and their family has a lot of money. So we know they are probably going to pay full price and be here for 6 years. Yeah, we're going to accept them. That's going to create a good balanced class when we have students that we're going to accept that we know are academically exceptional, and we're going to provide aid for them. So we kind of say the people here on the far right up top, they're paying for the kids on the left to get aid and get through school quick. So wherever you are on your chart, what we're going to try to do is get you to the left. We want you out of there in 4 years, and we don't want you paying full price. That's the main goal of our program. Okay, let's talk about timeline real quick. So junior year, a couple really important things. Of course, you want to be taking your standardized tests. You want to be, this is a big one, checking the status of your high school path. You want to make sure that the classes you're taking are aligning you with graduation and that all your grades are correct in the system as well. This is important to do junior year because if you do it senior year, it might be too late. Make sure you're on the right path. Senior year, and we'll talk a little bit more about timeline here in a minute, but basically, what you want to do, first off, you got to finish strong academically. It used to be you just applied, you got accepted, and it's party time. That's not the case anymore. I actually got an acceptance this week or last week from Georgia Tech for one of my students. It said in the letter, we will be checking after your semester is done to see how your academics are going, and we have the right to take away your acceptance if you're not staying up. So make sure they're finishing strong academically. Continue to take those tests if you need to. And then, of course, early fall, you're going to be doing your applications. In October, October 1 is actually when FAFSA opens. So you'll be filling out your financial information then as well. And then you receive award letters for aid, typically mid to late spring. So right about now, a lot of aid offers are coming in. You're going to want that. You're going to want all of those before you make a decision on where you're going to go. So hold off as late as you can, get all the information you can before you put in your acceptance. Okay, so a couple of case studies that I wanted to talk to you about from people who have come through our program. Now, we had Jackson, who, when he was in our program, raised his ACT about 3 points. He considered 13 schools out of his get paid bucket. Remember, we talked about fit in, get paid. We got him down to 13 schools, and then he applied to seven. Family income over 125,000, almost 100,000 in savings. When he first put in his information, we figured his SAI would be about 28.6, and we got it down and positioned him well, got it down to 23.8. Jackson actually ended up going to DePaul University, which is a private school, $63,000 a year. His package ended up costing him only about 29,000 a year. So that's a state school price, right? He went to a private school for public school cost, all because of how he was positioned. Next, we're going to talk about Ruth. Again, 21 schools out of that get paid bucket applied to 11. She didn't do the college search backwards. She did it the right way. And ended up applying to these 11 schools and family income over 150, 450 in savings. Got her SAI from 56 down to 32. And similar situation here, ended up getting a merit package for 37.5. Obviously, SAI was higher, but ended up getting a ton of merit money, and she's actually paying less than her SAI. Her SAI, remember, was 32. She's paying 24,350 to go to Butler University. Next, Jackie, super smart student. SAT got from 1460 to 1500. We ended up going for 21 schools in her get paid bucket, applied to seven. Family income over 200. Also had to factor in some business assets that they had and 160,000 in home equity. Ended up with started with a really high SAI at 83,000, got it down to about 57,000. And Boston University wanted this kid. So they enticed her with a $46,000 package. Ended up going to BU for only $37,000 a year. And finally, our last case study, I'm going to talk about Ben. This one's one of my favorites. Ben, pretty good SAT score, family income over 200, $88,000 and a 529. SAI when we got started was 56. We actually cut that in half to 28. He ended up going to the University of Indiana for $6,000 a year. The reason why that's one of my favorite is that showcases our average. That's about $21,000 a year that he saved at that school. And that's our average, about $84,000 per education that we can save if we do this the right way. Now, how do we do this the right way? That's a great question. We like to compare it to something that, most people go through in their life. And that is, what's the most expensive thing you're probably going to purchase? And that's probably your house, right? And that process is extensive. So when you are looking to purchase a home, you have to get pre-qualified first, right? You have to go to the bank, give them all your financials, all of that stuff. And then they come back and they tell you, this is the house we're going to allow you to purchase. This is the amount. It's usually high, and you're usually like, I'm not paying that. But at that point, you kind of set your budget and then you go shopping. So it's all of this due diligence to purchase something so expensive. And we're really putting effort into figuring out how much it will cost to do this. So, when we're doing this with probably the most expensive thing we're going to purchase, we're looking at what's number two. Probably you guys have seen the cost. Number two is probably going to be college. And in some cases, if you got three or four kids, that could actually be the most expensive thing you are purchasing. As you guys can see on the screen here, there's $1.81 trillion of student debt out there. That number doesn't even make sense compared to how many people have loans and how much money should be available. It is astronomical, right? So if you're going to go in blind, you're going to be a part of this number. If we're just going to say, hey, no strategy, we'll just figure it out when we go and we'll just borrow and figure it out, that's how this number gets so big. So our goal is to make sure you're not going to be a part of this number. Now, if we are doing all of this due diligence for the number one most expensive thing in our life, why aren't we doing it for number two? Why are we just going out hoping, saying we'll figure it out when we're going to college? And that's what we want to do. We want to pre-qualify for college. Now, I'm going to take you through this timeline and we'll talk about a number of things. So, this is kind of how it goes nowadays, right? So, college search, junior year, sophomore year, we're starting to pick colleges and we put together that list. And then we apply. We apply in the fall of our senior year. Now, after students apply, massive amounts of stress, right? What am I going to get in? I can't wait. My friend got in. I got to figure it out, right? And then they get accepted. And what's the first thing they do? It's social media. Hey, I got into wherever. And it's calling grandma. And it's, hey, guess what? I'm going here. I got accepted. I'm going here. And that's awesome. Um, so remember in October, you guys have filled out your financial aid forms. Your student gets accepted, but you don't actually get your financial aid answers until later in the spring. So really after they get accepted, then it's your turn to kind of stress and, oh no, like how much money are we going to get for school? And that kind of that leads to a ton of stress, right? Now, let's say your student gets into the school they wanted to. You already told them, hey, wherever you get in, we're going to figure it out. You can go there. And then you get your financial aid offer in March or April, and it's $2,500 to a $75,000 school. Then somebody's crying, right? It's either you or your student because you're telling them they can't go there. And what we're trying to do is eliminate that. Now, let's go back through this timeline and talk about how this benefits schools. Does not benefit the families, right? So again, the students applying in early fall. You guys are sending in your applications. They're learning all about your student, academics, extracurriculars, all of this. They have this information early fall. October, you're filling out your FAFSA. So the schools have your financial information. They also have your academic information. They have the entire puzzle put together in the fall, and they make you wait. The student gets their acceptance, and then you get your financial aid offer late in the spring. This is tailored for them because they want, as we just talked about, they want you to make emotional decisions. They want the student to say, I'm excited to go. They want mom and dad to say, you can go wherever you want. And that's how they end up getting full pay students, right? So, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of flip this timeline on its head. We are going to go through this pre-qualification process before we start applying to eliminate this stress. And what we're going to do is take out the guesswork. So let's build a list of schools that we know we're going to get into, that we know we're going to get aid before we start applying. This is strategy. It's opportunity. When we have this strategy, we're creating this opportunity for ourselves. We're putting a plan together. We're not just hoping. We're not just saying, I hope I get in or I hope I get aid. That's what gets us into trouble. That's that 1.81 trillion in debt. That's how most people do it. So basically what we're going to do is give you the answers to the test before you take it, right? And yeah, sure. Yeah, I can probably get aid from some school if I just apply, but are you getting as much as you possibly can? Are we squeezing every penny of aid that we possibly can? Sure, maybe you can afford it, but why pay for it if you don't have to, right? So during the pre-qualification process, this is what we're going to do. We're going to find out, we're going to talk about that budget. What kind of price of college can we afford? We're going to talk about your student aid index. That number that the federal government's going to give you, what is it? What does it look like right now? Can we get it lower before we fill out FAFSA? What kind of colleges are going to make you pay full price? And then which colleges are going to pay us? We're going to figure all this out during the pre-qualification process. What kind of aid do we qualify? Are we positioned to get need aid, or are we going to have to go after merit aid? Or hey, can we get both? And what schools are going to provide that for us? Can make it so much less stressful and the process so much easier. That's what we're looking to do. And remember that debt that we talked about earlier, those are the people that are going and just winging it. They're just saying, hey, we'll figure it out. We're not doing that. We're going to pre-qualify and figure out the best position we can put ourselves in. We want our student to go to the school with the best fit academically for sure. Socially, we want them to succeed, and then academically for the whole family. We want this to be a process that we can get the most out of. We want our student to enjoy it, get that education, and then we don't want to be broke at the end of it. That's the main goal, and we want to figure this out before we go. Now, that's all we have for today. If you would like to go through this process or talk about how to go through this process with us, we are happy to do that. Now, what we can do is we can go through what we call a pre-qualification meeting. In this process, in this meeting, we'll talk to you about your certain situation. We will do what's called what we call a free FAFSA X-ray. So we'll look at your financial situation and tell you where there might be some roadblocks. Do you want to be family A that is going to have to pay $27,000 a year at least, or do you want to be family B that's going to be closer to 11? We can tell you how to do that. We will absolutely happy to do this for a free consultation. If you're looking to do so, you can scan this QR code. That'll take you to our contact us page where you can fill out your information, or you can email me directly as you see right here. My name is Mike at dibcompanies.com. Absolutely feel free to email me if you have any questions, or if you would like to set up a time to speak one-on-one. If not, hey, hope you had a great time. Hope you learned a lot today. And again, if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thanks so much for joining us.